I think there's been a real shift amongst countries that are more historically allies of Israel in the last couple of weeks. This has been a long conflict since October 7th, and obviously October 7th was terrible. It was awful. So many people were murdered in one day, and that meant that despite that the Israeli response was also extremely harsh and extremely strong, there was a lot of kind of reluctance to maybe criticize or take action against Israel. And I think some of that wall has cracked in the last couple of weeks, and it's going to be very hard for Israel to rebuild that.
Now, after an emergency cabinet meeting yesterday, the British government announced it will formally recognise the state of Palestine in September unless Israel takes steps to significantly improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza. The Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, explained the decision at the UN in New York.
What we are attempting to do is affect the situation on the ground. We have seen the most horrific scenes. The global community is deeply offended by children being shot and killed as they reach out for aid. The time has come for a ceasefire. The time has come to see those hostages released, and the time has come to abate the suffering of the Palestinian people in Gaza, to get them the aid and the medical equipment and supplies that they need.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said the decision rewards Hamas. Let's bring in Arieh Kovler, a political analyst in Jerusalem. Arieh, can we start with, I think it's fair to say, the furious reaction there's been in Israel?
The UK isn't the first country to do this. Last week it was France. And the Israeli reaction is getting rather well rehearsed, because this is obviously a trend happening around the world. Yes, there was a furious reaction, but this is not the lead story in Israel today.
Yeah, we've just heard from the Foreign Secretary there saying they want to change the situation on the ground. How likely is it, do you think, that the UK taking this action or saying they're going to do it in September will materially change the situation on the ground?
I mean, it's not going to change terribly much of anything, right? The UK already has effectively some level of diplomatic relations with the PA, with the kind of proto-state of Palestine. It means changing, a couple of signs and a couple of things like that. It's unlikely to have any real impact whatsoever on the process one way or another. Israel says that it's making it harder to do a deal right now because Hamas feels that if it doesn't do a hostage deal in the next 6 weeks, then it gets recognition. I'm not sure that that's right. I don't know how much Hamas cares about a Palestinian state, but it certainly isn't helping really push anyone to do anything.
Did the France making the same declaration last week, well, actually without conditions, the UK have put conditions on it, did that not help engineer a situation where aid is now coming into Gaza in a way it hadn't been before?
So that's a fair point. I think I would say that it wasn't the thing itself that did that. It was rather this recognition of something Israel opposes, and France saying, we are going to do this thing that you really don't want us to do, was one of very many signs that the international community was not willing to accept a continued food blockade on Gaza. That, and honestly, Israel itself was kind of looking for a way out, having been stuck into kind of domestically, politically, this blockade situation, at the same time acknowledging that it was unsustainable. So I mean, it's not. I think you could say that to some extent, but it's not the recognition itself that did that. It's rather that was a sign of the tremendous fury of the international community, including amongst the Americans. And I think, it's Donald Trump's criticisms as much as anything that made the difference.
Yeah, and he said in his trip to Scotland this week that he had seen sort of starvation. That was a bit of a shift from the US president. To what extent do you think Israel's in danger of becoming sort of increasingly isolated as France, now Britain, decide to make public statements like this to say sort of they are now not happy with what's happening to the extent that they will make significant material changes?
But I think there's been a real shift amongst countries that are more historically allies of Israel in the last couple of weeks. This has been a long conflict since October 7th, and obviously October 7th was terrible. It was awful. So many people were murdered in one day, and that meant that despite that the Israeli response was also extremely harsh and extremely strong, there was a lot of kind of reluctance to maybe criticize or take action against Israel. And I think some of that wall has cracked in the last couple of weeks, and it's going to be very hard for Israel to rebuild that. It's not going to take months. It might take many years or even decades and a certain amount of internal change to rebuild some of that international trust and relationships.
Yeah, you described us as allies, and the UK has been a long-standing ally of Israel. Do you think that relationship has been damaged materially?
We will see. It depends a little bit on how Israel chooses to respond. I suspect the answer is no. It certainly, will take a little while. This is going to be something people come back to. But the fact that the Conservative Party still opposes this, the Reform opposes it too, and we have to say that now, means that this isn't some kind of a universal UK political position. And I think, Israel's first response is going to be to see if it can get opposition parties to commit to, I don't know, unrecognizing Palestine, whatever that means, rather than blowing up the relationship.
The significant shift that's just happened in the last few hours. The Arab world have told Hamas to disarm and surrender control of Gaza. Can you tell us what happened?
So it's not just the Arab world. It's a very broad coalition. It includes the EU and the UK and other countries. David Lammy was involved in this conference and was there. And there are those that I think rightly see this Arab World Declaration as part of the same initiative that Keir Starmer put with his kind of essential agreement to recognize Palestine. This is a broad coalition of countries saying they want to recommit to a two-state solution, and also there's a lot of criticism and pressure on Israel in there too. But specifically, it does take the time. The statement signed by many Arab nations to condemn the October 7th attacks, to say that Hamas cannot retain control over Gaza and they need to also disarm. That's a really big deal. It represents a shift in policy from many Arab countries around this new position, behind potentially strengthening the Palestinian Authority and recommitting back to a two-state solution. And I think you can see it kind of the flip side of Keir Starmer's announcement yesterday, putting pressure on Hamas.
Will it have an impact, do you think?
I don't know. Again, it's hard to see where the immediate impact is. It does help strengthen the Palestinian Authority at a time when it has been losing legitimacy amongst Palestinians, and also internationally. All the action is with Hamas right now. Everyone wants to talk to Hamas, wants to stop the fighting, wants to do a deal. And Israel has been very reluctant to include the PA in the picture. I think it's one of those things that might be built on in the coming months and years to translate into more concrete initiatives. At the moment, it's mostly symbolic, but I can see it being a basis for collective action in the future.
Arieh, thank you very much for your time and just analysis of how this news is being received in Israel. Arieh Kovler, the political analyst in Israel, speaking to us there from Jerusalem.